Welcome, friends. Pour your favorite cup of tea, coffee, or cocoa and settle in for Sips from the Sip from the Utica Institute Museum. Sips from the Sip is all about sharing the history of little-known people and places in Mississippi. We're serving up truth, justice, with a dollop of sass. I'm your host, Jean Green. Today's episode is the 32nd of a multi-part series of readings and discussions from the book, Black Man's Burden. Joining me today to discuss Chapter 16 is Mr. Gerald Collins. Mr. Collins is electronics engineering and technology instructor in the CTE division on the Utica campus. I'd like to welcome to our show today Mr. Gerald Collins. Mr. Collins is electronics engineering technology instructor.
Yes, ma'am.
For the Utica campus. He has a long connection to the Utica campus. He has been a student here, and he's entering in his 12th or 13th year as an instructor.
It would be 13th.
13 years as an instructor on this campus. So he has a dedication to Utica and to the story of William Holtzclaw. What we're going to do today is talk about Chapter 16 in The Black Man's Burden. And so I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Collins first to just kind of go into what leapt out from Chapter 16.
Wow. First of all, I want to thank you, Ms. Green, for the invite. And I thank you for being such a wonderful companion on our journeys together.
Oh, thank you.
At the library and working with you. But some of the things that really stood out for me was how this particular chapter, how it summarizes a work that Mr. Holtzclaw did for a 6-year period. He writes a letter to a Dr. Henry E. Cobb, and he gives him a synopsis of the things that he's been doing for this 6-year period.
Right.
And I mean, if you were to just see how Mr. Holtzclaw went from nothing to creating as he described it, a similar Hampton and Tuskegee Institute.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
I mean, so he describes also how he came into this wilderness, and he had no capital, no immediate friends, strangers amidst stranger surroundings, and his motives were questioned. And his ability to even accomplish the task was questioned.
Yes.
So he proved himself.
Right.
But in so doing, he also lays out his guidelines. He lays out the methodology that he used to overcome the obstacles that were presented before him. But one of the major things that you can look at is that he's not just proving how it can be done. He's proving what Booker T. Washington did. So
yes.
He did it, and he followed the same methodology, and he did it again. And others did it, and thus you have the little Tuskegee springing up all around.
Right, exactly. I like what you said about he did it. He followed a methodology and then laid the groundwork for others to come behind him and do the same thing. When he mentioned, Mr. Collins, what happened in the 6 years, we know famously he came with a broken bicycle and only ended up with $2.
Yes, ma'am.
But to go from that to what does he have here? He has 500 students and 25 teachers in 6 years.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
And then I will tell you, when he was listing the fields of study.
Wow.
He hit several of them. And he hit one that I had not heard of before.
Okay.
Wheel writing. And I was like, what in the world is wheel writing? It's wheel making. The person who made the wooden wheels.
Yes, ma'am.
That the mules could pull.
Right.
And I was like, that was an occupation. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. And also the other occupations that he mentioned, carpentry, blacksmith, saw making, general lumber manufacturing, bricklaying, and also going into sewing, dressmaking. And you might ask, why these particular disciplines?
Right.
Why are you picking these disciplines? And when you look at it, and the acquiring of land. But before we go there, he mentioned that the first task, the first rank was agriculture.
Exactly.
Agriculture. Yes. And we are taught that agriculture is the engine of a nation, right? When you have an agricultural land-based operation, now you're going to need the trucks. Now you're going to need the millwrights. You're going to need all these other disciplines, the stores, the carpenters, and all of that to come in and to build. But taking it another step further, and him coming into this wilderness, it appears as though he was trying to build his own little nation, if I can stretch it that far.
Yes,
because if you remember, when he first came, he came into the city of Utica. But after some trying times, he came and he brought himself out of that, and he moved to this rural area of virgin territory that he had to carve out for himself. He removed himself from those distractions.
Yes,
and so. And in doing so, he started to build. And what he was doing, what he was building, was really a little nation within this nation. Yes, ma'am. And it's phenomenal to see that, because that was taken also from his teacher, Booker T. Washington. And I had it here somewhere. I'm going to read, if I may, just this little snippet here.
And this is from what book?
This is from Up From Slavery, Booker T. Washington.
Gotcha.
In chapter 11, he states, after the coming of freedom, there were 2 points upon which practically all the people on our place were agreed. And I find that this was generally true throughout the South, that they must change their names and that they must leave the old plantation. They must leave the old plantation. And I'll stop it right there. So, and I'm reminded of a wise man that was going around giving out names and talking on that separation piece. You know, you got to come out of her, ye my people, and be ye not partakers of her sins and her plagues. That's Revelations 18:4. Okay. And so to come out and build and get your thing together, you know, and then now you can come on back and do the other piece, the integration.
Right. I see what you're saying. And yes, he patterned himself on this man you just quoted, on Booker T. Washington.
Yes, ma'am.
And he patterned himself on where Booker T. had come from Hampton.
Right, yes, ma'am.
So that head, heart, hands credo that was the basis of the Hampton mythos was also taken on by Booker T. Washington and then passed on to his students, that you had to work with the whole person.
Absolutely.
You know, you had to take every facet of them. You couldn't just take the one thing. You had to work with the whole thing, the whole person.
And it had to be practical.
Yes.
Practical, you know.
That's
practical.
right.
Yes,
That's
ma'am.
Right. So as we talk about what he was discussing in this chapter, like you said, he was giving a reckoning of what they had accomplished in the 6 years to show several things. One, that yes, the monies that had been invested were well spent, but also that they had actually made a change in the lives of the people in the community, in the community itself.
Yes, ma'am.
So what did you pick up also from this? Especially, it was real interesting when he talked about the churches.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
What did he say? That they were, at one time they were unwilling to meet in the churches at night because there was so much going on. There was fighting and carrying on.
Yes, ma'am. And they were even selling whiskey. He calls it Blind Tiger whiskey. I guess that might have been the brand of the day, but he was talking about right there at the church.
Yes.
You know, and so the people were kind of lawless, you know.
Right.
Yes, ma'am. But the work that he did was a work of civilizing a savage, if you will. And we had been put in that position. We had been reduced to savagery. And the work that he did, not just talking it, but he was actually walking it. You know, the saying is, I'd rather see a sermon any day than hear one.
Exactly.
And so the example that he was giving the people and the work that he did was actually phenomenal.
Talk about what he did with his teachers about the extension service aspects of it. If you remember that part of where they divided the surrounding area into parts and each...
Yes, ma'am.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yes, ma'am. When you mention that, it reminds us of the modern extension service that the Agriculture Department has today, the USDA, United States Department of Agriculture, how they would set up these extension agents, county agents, if you will.
Oh, yes.
Now, it came to prove that the county aid turned out to be corrupt. Modern day. I'm skipping over some time here. And that's why you had the lawsuit, the Pickford 1, Pickford 2, the black farmers were being discriminated against.
Oh, I remember that, yes.
Yes, ma'am, because at one time during his life in 1909, in that area there, we blacks coming out of Reconstruction had over 16 million acres of land, and now today we've got maybe 5 million. Part of that was the result of some shady dealings with the USDA. But the way that he would formulate his plan and that methodology that he would use those county agents, right? And they would have meetings. They would go and they were like given a territory to cover. And then they would come back and they would like compare notes.
But these were his teachers taking on this role, right? This was not someone that was an official paid county agent. At his time, at Holtzclaw's time, it was actually the instructors.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
That went out and showed the folks. Didn't just tell them, like you said.
Right.
It wasn't a sermon they were taught.
Right.
It was a sermon they could see.
Right.
What would be the correct methods for building a house or farming the land or whatever.
Ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And when I read that, I feel it kind of pricks me because we see that method worked. Why aren't we doing it today?
Why aren't we doing it today, Mr. Collins?
I'm slapping myself, I'm kicking myself. Why am I not doing that today? We do it in our own little way, but in a structured, methodical manner, with, what do they call them, where things are checked and you have goal posts and you're checking and making sure that people do what they need to do.
You have evaluations and checks and balances to make sure that happens. Yeah,
we call it deliverables.
Yes,
right.
Yes.
In project management, it's called a deliverable. And so to assign an instructor to go and to come back and report. And we have to get about the business of that communication and comparing notes. Yeah. Because, you might not have the solution. I might have the solution.
Exactly. That's right.
And when we compare notes, we can get a better result. But yes, ma'am, that process there was really, really, really the thing that got it done, was that extension service and putting people in the community's face. You get to come off the campus. You get to go out and you get to hit it. Yeah. And I'm kicking myself again.
Don't kick yourself too hard. Yes, but you do have to go into the community. You do have to meet the people where they are.
Absolutely.
And one thing I really wish this message would get across to our current situation is that I know it's easy to put media posts out there. Right. It's too easy to show that online.
Right.
And it's real easy to throw up an ad on whatever television station is out there. That's easy.
Right.
But what's not easy is meeting somebody at the grocery store or meeting them at church or out at an event and letting them see that you are a human being.
Right.
And that you can look them in the eye and show them interest.
Right.
Because going back to what you said earlier, I'd rather see it than hear it. Right. Don't tell me how you care about the community and you're not coming to the community.
Hey.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Don't tell me how you have our interests at heart and we don't see you anywhere but running over us as you get off the campus, right? So that kind of thing. He had one statement that I want to touch on. He said, "But our labors have not been confined to the building of a material institution. We have built our institution, as it were, in the hearts of the people. We have built our institution in the hearts of the people."
Listen at that.
You know, I want us to do the same thing. I mean, as you said, Mr. Collins, the groundwork has been laid. The pattern has been set. All we have to do is pick it up.
Right.
And we don't necessarily have to modernize it. Because if it is something that is tried and true, you don't remake the wheel. You don't try to reinvent that. Right. But you can take it and use it, because people are people.
True.
No matter what their access to technology tells you. Right. And to me, one of the lessons of this chapter was that he built his institution in the hearts of the people. Right.
And when you have a institution that's built in the hearts of the people, then you can go to the bank and you'll never get a check stamped insufficient funds.
Here you go.
Because your people got your back.
Your people have your back, right. You know, if we're going to get into a certain mindset, and I'm going to say a word, and I may get a little feedback on that. The word is tithing. Sometimes we are ready to go dig in our pocket and pull out that $15 or that $20.
Okay.
But we're not willing to give 15 minutes or 20 minutes of our time. That's your tithe, too.
That is true.
You know, I hear that all the time. You know, well, I tithe, I pay. I'm like, but how much of your time are you giving? You know, are you willing to come out and let people, you know, see what you do? What is the work that you do? I know the college does something now they called, what is it, that thing y'all do on Fridays where you go out to the schools, you call it? There's something.
Industry visits is one of them. And also we do a little recruiting.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
And that's good. I'm not knocking that, because that's a wonderful thing to get out and show the community and the people around that there are programs available.
Right.
But you can't turn off, and I'm going to say this about my profession, you can't turn off being a librarian because you walk out of the building.
True.
No matter where I am, no matter who I talk to, they're going to ask me for information. And I can't say, well, look, now, I'm not at the library.
Right.
I have to try to help them get that information.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
As the work we do here at the museum, when somebody comes up to talk to me about the history, I can't say, oh, sorry, it's 4:05, I'm not at the museum. I have to talk to them about that. I have to have the heart for that information.
And anyone that's has that passion, or that might be something that they're born to do, you know, a teacher, an instructor, someone willing to share, they will seek out these teachable moments and instruct and share.
Right. And that's what he was doing here.
Absolutely.
In that Teachers Extension Movement, in that Black Belt Improvement Society.
Absolutely.
He was stepping outside of the parameters of the school and reaching out to help the people better improve themselves. And these things were being seen by the political officials.
True.
Because he was writing on a regular basis to the governor.
True. And also, when you mention writing, one of those, let me see if I can find it here, how it's where they actually had a paper, a newspaper, a printing operation going.
The Southern Notes paper.
That's what it was called?
The school had a newspaper called Southern Notes.
Wow. But see, he had learned from Booker T. Washington. In his day, I was reading from the same book, Up From Slavery, he's saying that how he got in a situation where a politician who he really, really liked and he felt that he had the right heart.
Right.
But the politician didn't know the fine English and all of that.
Right.
And he was being attacked. And
that was when Holtzclaw was in Georgia, was it not?
Yes, ma'am. And so he wrote under an alias.
Yes.
Right. And he actually saved the politician
yes.
and won it over. But somebody's got to be in a position to publish the good news.
Yes.
And he recognized that at an early age, because you can be isolated.
Yes.
You know, and people can come against you. And
yes.
so him writing the papers and getting that information out, it was really, really, really important.
Mm-hmm. Getting back to our discussion on what the letter writer, there was a letter written to Holtzclaw, and he said, the person who wrote to him said, I think this was Dickerson from New Haven, Connecticut, who told him, what impresses me most about your work is not what you have done at the school, but what you've done in the community. Right?
Right.
And someone else told him, what I said to you there, I repeat now, namely that such good work and results as you show at Utica, you being a graduate of Tuskegee, is a veritable guarantee of the wisdom and worth of the Tuskegee method. So I did take issue with one term. You know, the one thing about Holtzclaw's book is I have to constantly remind myself that this is 1915 in segregated Jim Crow America.
Okay.
And so some of the terminology is not going to be terminology that I'm comfortable with.
Okay.
But one of the writers said, the solution of the Negro problem by true education is the only solution. And my visit to the South made me more hopeful of results than I was before. I took issue with the phrase Negro problem.
Okay.
And, you know, are we a problem? And if we are approached as a problem, then that, you know, but I had to remind myself that this was 1915 in Jim Crow America. And so it would have been a common thought that getting education for black folks would solve a Negro problem if you were of another racial persuasion.
Wow.
Right. So I'm not saying that this man did not have the uplifting of the people at heart, but I had to really understand what they were coming from, where they were coming from.
But the author did point out that true education is the only solution.
And it is.
But then you have to define what is, like you're saying, what is that Negro problem? Okay. And solving that problem. Holtzclaw came, you don't judge a man all the time by his friends.
Right.
You judge a man by his enemies. And if you really can imagine the enemies that he was creating, okay, now you've got here black people amassing 3,000 acres of land.
I got you.
Okay, now what is the landlords, the tenants, what do they have to say? What do the sharecroppers have to say about that, right?
Exactly.
Here you this becomes a Negro problem.
It does.
Okay.
Yes.
And then here you are, you're raising people up to a moral standard.
Yes.
And that's probably one of the reasons why they had the dressmaking and you know, the refinement that he was teaching. Now you're getting people out of this debauchery. You're getting people, he was mentioning, out of jail and getting them, stopping them. He was like a traffic cop, really stopping people from going to the jail. And that was the chain gang. And so here you're interfering with money-making operations, right?
I hadn't thought about it like that.
Because today, prison is on, you know, it's big business, private prisons, you know. I mean, they might pay you 75 cents a day, you know, for skilled labor in a penal institution.
Yeah.
So look at your woodworking. Now you don't have to go to the lumber mill, right? So you're upsetting some people who could be making this profit, right?
I see what you're saying.
Okay, so now the person that made that blind tiger whiskey,
you
know, hey, you know, he was making money off of that.
That's right. You're interrupting his cash flow.
Absolutely.
I'm glad you brought that up because that gives me some clarity on where that was probably coming from. Okay. You know, when you think about, as you said, what kind of enemies he was making, I hadn't really thought about this in that context. I want to thank you, Mr. Collins.
Oh, thank you, Miss Green,
for agreeing to be on our program today. And I also always appreciate our discussions, and I have over the years that we have about Holtzclaw and our history.
Yes, ma'am.
But I do appreciate how you have included portions of this book in your class.
Yes, ma'am.
Because you have included learning the history of the institution in what your students need to do. And I would really love, only today.
Just think about it. We're at Tuskegee University. And
yes.
This is the Tuskegee Airmen flying over, okay?
I like that. I like that. They're doing that low pass over the building.
But you know that there are selling points to the campus. You know, this campus, the aesthetics, is a beautiful campus, and it's a sanctuary.
Yes.
You know, when you come on this campus, you know you got to come correct, right?
That's right.
We got our own police force.
That's right.
And so we've got health if you need some nurses or something like that. And these are some attractive things to be able to pull away, because you step outside of the gates, some places it's really chaotic. You know?
Yes,
and
that's
so
true.
To be able to come in and we can sell this place really as a sanctuary.
Yes, it really is in more ways than one.
Right.
I like that we're able to take our students and bring them in and nurture them. And even though we are in the rural, we are taking them away from a lot that distracts them as well.
True.
So, thank you, Mr. Collins.
No, thank you, Miss Green.
Thank you for tuning in for Sips from the Sip. Join me next time for a reading of Chapter 17 of William Holtzclaw's Black Man's Burden. This program is supported by donations from our listeners. If you enjoy learning about the history of William Holtzclaw, the Utica Institute, and Mississippi, consider donating. To support Sips from the Sip and all the work at the Utica Institute Museum, visit our Patreon at patreon.com/Utica Institute. Until next time, this has been Jean Green coming to you from the heart of the Sip.